Hi everyone. I'm going to be talking about this book, Anarchist Pedagogies, Collective Actions, Theories, and Critical Reflections on Education. This is saying a compilation. That's not the right word. Whatever. It's a bunch of essays by different people. Collection. There we go. It's a collection of essays written by different people about anarchist education and really just liberatory education in general. I will say I am a public school teacher. I teach high school, 9th and 10th grade world history and African American history, and I was pretty excited to read this because I was hoping there was going to be some specific things that I could then turn around in my classroom and try out or use or adapt, and it is not at all what I thought it was going to be. So that's just like if you're like a public school teacher in a K-12 and you're thinking that there's going to be any stories about people that teach K-12, you will be very disappointed. That is not the focus of this book. With that being said, there were some really cool things I took away from this. Overall, though, I found this book really frustrating, and I kind of hated it a lot. And after I do this YouTube video, I'm actually going to donate it because it just pissed me off. So I guess I'll just go over like my big issue with this book is that, first of all, when you look at the contributors, almost all of them are professors and none of them are K-12 teachers. But a lot of them have really strong opinions about public school, K-12 public school. And a few of the essays really go into detail about this concept that like K-12 public education is unsolvable and it's unsavable, and that it's impossible for K-12 public school to ever be, a liberatory education because public school is run by the state. Which I understand that argument. It makes sense, right? If an oppressive government is running this institution, then how can it truly be liberatory? I get that. But then a bunch of the essays turn around and talk about how colleges and universities are savable and are worth holding on to and can be liberatory. And that doesn't make any sense to me at all. First of all, a bunch of universities are also public schools that are run by the state, number one. And then the ones that aren't run by the state are private, and they're run by corporations and donors, which is worse than being run by the state. Like, that's less freedom and more controlled. And then a bunch of these essays kind of go off on like saying that public school teachers are unable to truly be free in their teaching and like do what they want to teach, which is true to an extent, right? It depends on like what time period we're talking about, what year is it, what law was passed, who's the governor at the time, who's the mayor at the time, who's the superintendent at the time, who's the principal at the time, right? There are a lot of open-ended questions that need to be answered to sort of determine how much freedom does any given teacher have in any given school across the country, right? And I remember as a middle schooler, there was a year where there was a major crackdown and all the teachers were given like scripted curriculum that they were supposed to read word for word. So like, is it true that public school can be super controlled? Yeah, totally. Is it always that way? No, not at all. And in fact, in my experience, and I've been a student, in public school and now have been teaching for 8 years. This is my 8th year teaching. A lot of times teachers have way more freedom than people on the outside seem to realize that they have. I can pretty much teach whatever I want to teach. And the most liberatory education I ever had was at public schools, ever in my life. And when I was in high school, like, we did real things that actually mattered in the real world. I remember in my engineering class, we did a project where we had to create like a water distillation process, right? So we had to like physically build, first design and then physically build a way to take water that was undrinkable and make it drinkable. And then we gave away our designs for free to an organization that was working on the ground in Sierra Leone to help get people clean drinking water. And that was like not a exception at my school. Those were the kinds of things we were doing all the time. There was this idea that the things that we do in our classes, right, especially for final projects for any given unit that we were working on, should matter in the real world. And they were very creative and they were collaborative. A lot of times they were group projects, and usually they had a tie to like the real actual world in which we live. Then I went to college and I didn't do anything like that ever. We read things, we wrote essays about them. The teacher read the essays, we got a grade. That is all I have ever done in either undergrad or grad school. I literally went to grad school. This is the name of my program that I was in. I was in a program called the Masters of Transformative Education and Social Change. That was the name of the program. Master in Transformative Education and Social Change. You know what the final project for that 2.5-year program was? Write a thesis paper that's incredibly long and turn it in, and the professor will grade it. And then it will get published on a database that no one will be able to read unless they have a password and pay money. Cool. That's like the most unliberatory thing I could have imagined, but awesome. Keep telling me about how K-12 public school teachers are so controlled and unable to be liberatory, while universities are somehow better and more worth saving and more able to be liberatory. So that really just pissed me off. I also don't agree with the premise that anything that is run by the state is inherently unable to be liberatory. Libraries are run by the state, and like they could be funded better. We can talk about that. We can talk about how the government intentionally underfunds them because they don't like libraries, right? Or how they sometimes try to control what books are at the library, which we're seeing now. But the concept that we all pay taxes and are therefore able to go to a place where there's free books to read it's a great idea. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's not bad because the government is collecting the taxes. So that just really bothered me. I guess I will just go over a couple of the essays that I really liked. There was some cool union stuff in here that talked about how unions did a bunch of different events, like different plays they would put on, but then it also talked about these study groups that they had, and I really like that because it talks about like, yeah, they had fun, but they like hardcore studied, and some of these people didn't know how to read, right? So they were like learning how to read at the same time that they're learning their history through reading. And I thought that was really cool because I've become pretty frustrated with some people on the far left, like I am, who just like spend a lot of time on social media reposting things, some of which are cool, but like who really haven't read anything. And okay, maybe you're not gonna read everything, but like watch a documentary, like learn some history. We need to learn some history. As a history teacher, I think everyone needs to spend some more time studying, like literally. And so it was encouraging to see like, you know, yeah, that's what people were doing in these different organizations, including these more radical unions. So that was cool. There was a really cool essay in there that was about street medics, and when I first started it, I didn't totally understand how street medics related to education, but then it actually talked about this concept that like healthcare, like basic healthcare, like things like first aid, or Narcan, or like stop the bleed trainings. Basic healthcare does not need to be gatekept by medical professionals. it should be taught to ordinary people, just like CPR, right? That's the concept with the CPR class that people take. There's a lot of things like that. That's what the essay's positing, basically, that can be taught to the general public, and it would save an insane amount of lives. So that was really cool, and I hadn't thought of it before. Let's see, what else? They're talking about grades and how grading is terrible. Grading is terrible. No question about that. Grades are trash and bad. There was one that was talking about like one of the free schools. By the way, I hate when people try, I don't know why, but I feel like it bothers me when like there's an alternative to something, so like it's not a public school but it's like a free school, but then to show that it's different and cool and hip, you have to spell it with a K instead of a CH. It's fine. We can just spell it the way that it's normally spelled. But anyway, that was kind of cool because it talked about how kids are often babied more than they need to be. So like at this school, some young kids were using like knives to cut vegetables. I think 5-year-olds. And I was thinking about my own son who's 3 now, and I was like, yeah, he could definitely do that by the time he's 5. But those are the kind of things like that, to be fair, would not happen at a public school because everyone would be worried about liability, and then kids get babied because of that. And it makes them kind of helpless and dependent, which is fair and true. There's an essay about skill shares, which was cool. It's like people come in and basically sign up like, here's what I'm good at, here's like some skills that I'm able to teach other people, and then other people look at the list and they write down like which ones they're interested in, and they base the classes around that. So that was cool. Oh, this one was very funny. Okay, there was an essay in here that actually had me laughing out loud because of how stupid it was. So these people were doing this workshop, and one of the things that the whole workshop, they had them, the participants, first of all, the people hadn't met each other, or like some of them had met each other, but some of them hadn't. So in the workshop, they have them detail their educational history, like their personal educational history. So they have to talk about like, how has your personal experience been with education throughout your life? A lot of times these can be traumatic. By the way, they wrote about this like it was a revolutionary idea. I've been asked to do this 6 times now. It's not that deep. You're not that special for thinking of this. But anyway, so they do this workshop. Seemingly they consulted no actual real trained teachers at any point. By the way, there's a reason teachers go to school. We're not just like idiots. We learn things about teaching, right? It's a craft. Like, people work at it. So I guess they spoke to no teachers before they did this. So first of all, their workshop was 4 hours long. If you had asked any teacher if that was a good idea, they would have said, no, that's too long. People cannot sit for 4 hours. No one wants to do that. That's a bad idea. Okay, so they have a 4-hour workshop where they're supposed to be writing and then talking about and sharing their educational experiences. Well, a lot of these stories are traumatic, right? Sometimes like super traumatic. Now, a teacher who's taught for any real amount of time, especially if they've taught kids, by the way, could have told you that, okay, if the people know each other a lot, or there's going to be a series of workshops, you need to help them get to know each other more and build that trust before you ask them to share something super vulnerable. Or if this is a one-off and they're not going to have time to really get to know each other, then you need to give them options so that they can sort of like build around consent about like how much they want to share, right? So you need to tell them like, hey, write, go as deep as you want to in your writing, but don't feel like you have to share everything. Just share the things you're comfortable with sharing and skip over the things that you're not, right? Or you could have somebody else read it if you want to. Or maybe you don't want to say it out loud, but you do want to share it and you just want people to read it. Like, give people some options so that they can feel comfortable. If you had asked any public school teacher about that, they would have told you that. But apparently we're dumb, so no one called us dumb in this book, but apparently we're not worth consulting, so whatever. Let's see. Another cool essay was about Zapatistas and how they've just been like really pretty grossly fetishized by the left, especially here in the United States. And this is a problem for like a number of reasons. Number one, it's just like another example of like fetishizing indigenous movements as if it's like this one pure thing that's going to be able to teach the rest of us and save the rest of us, which is racist and gross and weird. But then it also goes on to talk about how like the images that are often romanticized and fetishized the most of Zapatistas is images of them armed, and that's really the tiniest little fraction of what they do. They like run schools and garden mostly. And also, their whole thing about their army and what they say all the time is that it is designed to dissolve itself. They don't want it to even exist. They don't even want to have guns. They don't even believe in guns. But that is not the way that people on the left in the United States share about it or talk about it. So that was cool. Then there was an essay by actually one of my old professors, which is really cool actually. It talks about a little bit of a defense of science and talking about how like, yeah, we have somehow decided in recent years that like science is bad, and I think that's because it's been co-opted by capitalism in a lot of ways. But the essay was talking about how like, yeah, if you trace back the history of like who has been persecuted by authoritarian regimes, a lot of times it's scientists, and that should tell you something about scientists. Like, there's liberation in there that is worth saving and defending and keeping. So that was cool, and it kind of broke down the binary and talking about like we need an all the above approach to liberation. The one part that bothered me about this essay was it talked about what makes humanity different than animals is that humanity is free and is conscious of the fact that it's free, and other animals aren't. That's like completely incorrect. And if you ever watch like a video of a factory farmed animal that is rescued and then released into the wild, and those videos are all over YouTube, you can tell very obviously, yeah, animals know when they're free and when they're not free, and they definitely prefer being free, and they're very much conscious of that. To me, that entire argument is just something you tell yourself to make yourself feel better about eating meat. So that bothered me. And that's pretty much it. There was a couple other good ones, but those are the ones that stuck out to me the most. And again, if you're gonna have a book about liberatory education and you don't have a single K-12 teacher contribute to the book, to me that's like a really big issue. So yeah, I wouldn't read this, but there was some gems in it. So maybe if you get it for free and just read the good essays, and then don't keep it. Alright, bye everybody. Okay, wait, I forgot to read part of the intro of this book, which is like, it's the introduction, is the first thing you read. And this is how I knew I was going to hate the book, like the second I started it. So the only mention of a teacher where they actually go into detail about that they ever taught at K-12 is the person who writes the intro, right? And he talks for a moment in the intro about his time as a public school teacher. And he talks about this supposed thing that happened, which I don't believe really happened, when he was administering like the state issued standardized test. And one of the students in his class like called him out as a sellout. So I'll just read you this and then I'll talk about it for a second because it's hilarious to me. Okay, here we go. During class, I was passing out the dreaded federal standardized test when one of my students, who considered himself an anarcho-punk, yelled out, "Hey, Mr. Haworth, you're a fucking sellout." I couldn't help but think about the 2 decades I've been involved in punk and hardcore, as well as the intense collective work many, including myself, had participated in throughout those years. How could I be a sellout? I stopped everything and asked him what it meant to be a punk and how he identified and acted as an anarchist within the overwhelming functions of the state and capitalism. I went on to ask the rest of the class specifically, if I don't have a certain punk aesthetic and work as a teacher in the public schools, is that considered selling out? Okay, first of all, I don't believe that this really happened. Okay, like if you've ever either been a student or a teacher, you know when it's time to do this, like the state issued standardized test, you're not stopping in the mid. It's like, if we want to talk about how public schools are super controlled, this is a way they're super controlled. You can't stop the test in the middle of passing out the test. That's like breaking the law. The state comes in, arrests you. Like, they don't arrest you, but they cancel all the test scores. They accuse you of cheating. It's like a big deal. You don't know, this never happened. It's like incredibly timed and regimented, and they have people that like come in through your room and like monitor you. You're not just like stopping passing out the test in the middle of it to go on a little speech. Also, there's no way that, I mean, maybe, but I would be so shocked if there is a teenager somewhere that describes themselves as an anarcho-punk and then is able to, at the drop of a hat, from like no background context, able to answer the question how they identified and acted as an anarchist within the overwhelming functions of the state and capitalism. Like, this didn't happen. And then he turned to the rest of the class and said, if I don't have a certain punk aesthetic and I work in a teacher in public schools, am I a sellout? Also, why are you as a grown adult so obsessed with even the term sellout? That's like a childish thing that like, so I love punk, and when I was a kid, I was like really like considered myself like a punk, right? That's like how I identified. And at the time, like lower high school, like 9th and 10th grade, I was obsessed with this concept of selling out. Then you like, I don't know, grow up and realize that's like a silly word that is too vague to actually be describing what it is you really mean, which is like giving into capitalism or becoming like an oppressive factor of capitalism. Like, that's what the kid's really saying, right? Like, you are helping facilitate our oppression by passing out this test and administering this test, which is true, right? You're complicit in this, right? As teachers, like, you're doing the test, you're complicit in this thing that is terrible. But there, like, as a grown adult, that you're this upset that you're like, oh, my kid doesn't see me as a cool punk rocker anymore. I'm so sad about it. It's very embarrassing to me. It was like cringe for me to read. And also I don't believe that it's true. And that was the only in-depth, that was the only real mention of like public school teachers' experience in a public school. So, yeah. Okay, bye.